Welcome back to the Fapstinence podcast, where you're helping you find freedom from porn. My name is Peter, and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin, who's doing it pretty casual today. Kevin,
Yeah, this has nothing to do with the fact that I'm having a bad hair day, I promise.
oh,
Oh,
I have a bad hair day every day, dude. You have amazing hair, so don't even get there.
well, thank you. Not today, I don't. That's why the hat's here. All right.
Well, all right. Well, on today's episode of the podcast, or this week, on this week of the podcast, we're going to be talking about what I think is a very, very, very crucial aspect of overcoming porn addiction is choosing the right accountability partner. Now, to start off this week, I really wanted to focus on a couple of things. We looked at a couple really successful recovery programs, and we noticed some common themes that we both personally feel very strongly are important aspects of recovery from addiction, but especially for recovery from addiction to pornography. So we wanted to cover some of those common themes, and I wanted to start by mentioning the three programs that we looked at, and they're all three of them are I think are really good programs. Number one being Strive 21. Matt Fradd is a guy who started a program. It's a 21-day challenge, and it's very Christian centered, but it's amazing. They do really good work. Actually, Matt Fradd is also connected with Covenant Eyes, which is a program, software rather, that I find is a very, very good tool resource for guys to use if they're serious about quitting their addiction to pornography. But Strive 21 has some really good information on there. We kind of looked at their website and compared it as well to Fight the New Drugs, new program that they just released called Fortify. And we also looked at the age-old classic. It's been around for a long time. It's helped a lot of guys out from a recovery to alcoholism, Alcoholics Anonymous. And so, Kevin, what we're doing and looking at these three programs is identifying those common themes that we feel are so necessary for recovery from addiction, but also recovery from porn. And we're going to talk about what aspects of those we really, really strongly recommend. So, if you want to start us off with the first one, I think that'd be an amazing way to get going.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, something that we found as a common theme with all three of these is daily tracking of goals, the victories and setbacks to learn your patterns and what kind of what leads you down back that road to the vice that you're trying to abstain from. So I can speak a little bit on Fortify and Alcoholics Anonymous because I've delved through both of those. I've never actually done Alcoholics Anonymous because I'm not an alcoholic, but I've done a lot of research on it. So when it comes to Fortify, it's pretty cool because you track each day. And what's cool is, as you say, okay, was today a victory? Did I relapse, not relapse? Was it good or bad? What led to, what are the reasons that it was good? If it was a bad day, what kind of led to it? And the more data that you have over time to kind of track what might lead you to a relapse, you start to see trends as to like, well, if you're tempted to relapse, maybe that's happening because a certain thing happens in your life that you're avoiding on a regular basis. So, for example, if you have a really stressful day at work, you notice that all the days that you were stressful, you actually ended up either relapsing or being really tempted to relapse. I think that's really cool that a program like that kind of helps you track it. So that's pretty awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
In
Strive.
terms of, oh, good.
I was going to say Strive 21 does something very similar as well. Overall, it's very important for you to actually have an understanding of what your patterns are. You're going to have patterns of relapse, if you want to think of it that way. And that's true for good habits and bad habits. So, what we want to do is recognize our patterns, the stressors, things like that, that lead us to relapse. And we do that through those daily check ins. So, continue.
Yeah. I think we should move on actually to the next one, community support, because I really believe that, tracking your goals daily and trying to understand yourself, I mean, that's kind of like the overall mission of life in general, not just specifically overcoming an addiction. But again, the whole thing with addiction is that it becomes such a powerful force in your life that your life purpose in that moment is to overcome that addiction. And for a lot of guys trying to quit porn, they've recognized that it's such a major issue that it's the most important thing in their life to try to solve right now. And that's what this podcast is for, to help you help within that context. But there's a lot of people who, and we can get into AA in just a second because it's a great example. Because on this journey of self-development, overcoming addiction, overcoming your vices and dependency on those vices, you don't have to do it alone. In fact, there is pretty recent studies showing that going at it alone is less effective, way less effective, even under the care of a professional, than having a community of people, a community of peers who are going through the same exact thing as you. So let's talk about Alcoholics Anonymous. There was a series of studies that happened pretty recently, conducted by the psychiatry psychiatry department, I should say, of both Harvard University and Stanford University. So they worked in conjunction with one another. Now, I don't know about you, but those are two pretty legit names to throw out there in terms of legitimacy, right? They tend to hire pretty smart people at Harvard and Stanford to conduct studies like this. But anyway, what they found is Alcoholics Anonymous, although it's more of like a peer-based accountability system where there's not really any kind of doctorate or doctorate level experts that are there to help out, it's actually more effective than cognitive behavioral therapy done by a professional. And this kind of baffled them a little bit when they studied it, because the researchers were a little bit skeptical going in of the actual effectiveness of AA. And they found that because there's that community support, because within that community, each person has kind of a role to play for their own part, because they are supplanting their old communities that partook in those vices with an active community trying to abstain from it, that the success rate of AA is way higher than, again, having one-on-one individual attention from a cognitive behavioral therapist, which is absolutely astounding in my mind. So that just goes to show you, having community support is so key to everything. If you can overcome one addiction, and it's something that millions of people, I think at this point, have helped to overcome their alcoholism since it was founded. If you can do that with one vice, such as being addicted to alcohol, you can do the same exact thing with overcoming porn addiction if you have a great community.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier when you were referencing the daily check-ins and things like that, that's just a life-related thing you need to get good at. But it's especially important when you're talking about overcoming addiction and bad habits, because I honestly think of the two a little bit synonymously. There's a lot of bad habits that lead you further into addiction if you don't cut them to the curb. And so community support, having that success rate with alcoholism, with Alcoholic Anonymous, that will translate. And it does translate. You can see these other programs that are specifically for porn addiction are using a similar community support system. It is very important to be working alongside other people, because AA is okay. So if we break down AA's setup, you got a sponsor, but you also have the people going through the program with you, right? And you immediately have to admit, this is an issue for me. Hey, my name is Peter. I'm an alcoholic. Well, when it comes to porn addiction, you at least need to look yourself in the mirror and have that conversation and say, hey, my name is Peter. I'm struggling with porn addiction. And then with regards to reaching out and getting help, it's important that accountability partner is going to be like your partner with an AA, that person who's going along this path with you, or someone who's already been through it. And you can kind of think of, as AA has sponsors, people who have already completed the program who help you through it along the way. They're reminders of the success. In fact, in later episodes, you'll hear us talk a lot about the elephant and the rider, and you'll be talking about the river, talking about your why, things like that. This translates really well into those things. So bear in mind, it's very important that you choose the proper accountability partner to do this stuff. And we just want to point out some major elements of recovery programs that we think apply super well. So with that being said, access to professional help, that's us. That's other programs that do this stuff well. I think I would never say the buck stops here with regards to anything. There's always so much more to learn. So I always encourage people to ingest as much from intelligent people who've studied this stuff as possible. So that's why, another reason why I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, Fortify, Strive 21, and Alcoholics Anonymous, because there's a lot you can learn from those programs. We're going to specifically implement that in the way that we think is the best way possible for you to recover from addiction as well. So please bear with us. As a professionals here, we still have a lot to learn ourselves, but we really want you to take into account what we've learned and we feel like really works.
Real quick, I wanna interject just for a second. I guess the way that I think that we view ourselves is basically like an AA as the sponsors, right? We're the ones who have really overcome this and are helping you out along the way. But your fellow members in that AA circle are the ones who are actively trying to get like those new tokens that they get of like, I'm 30 days sober, 60 days sober, 90 days sober, right? And we're the ones who have done it who can help inspire you to do that. Because again, this is just proven based off of the studies that have been done recently by Stanford and Harvard that, this type of format is more effective than just having like one super expert that just sits down with you one-on-one and does cognitive behavioral therapy type things with you to try to help you out one-on-one. If you have someone who has gone through this struggle, right? Maybe if they don't technically have a psychology degree background or anything, right? Maybe they might not be an official doctor of this stuff, but they've gone through it. And then on top of that as well, you have a community of guys going through the same exact thing as you that has been proven with alcoholism to be more effective. And because there's so many similarities between any kind of addiction, but alcohol dependency and porn dependency, we can pretty much assume that it's going to have a similar effect with abstaining from porn as well. So that's what we're really trying to do here. So think of us as your sponsors, and that leads us greatly into having an accountability partner, someone who you can relate to. In this specific podcast, we're going to be talking about someone who is going along the journey with you as well. So let's get right into that. Yep.
Yeah, so when we're talking about accountability partners, there might be one of two scenarios that we're going to be going through. Number one is your accountability partner is joining you on this path. So you're going to come to somebody who is also trying to quit porn and say, hey, buddy, listen, we're both dealing with this. I think we should do it as partners and be checking in with each other on the way. That's one scenario. But you might find that the person that you feel like would be a good accountability partner for you is not someone who is actively trying to quit porn themselves. That's okay. But the way that you go about structuring that relationship is going to be a little bit different than if they're going through it with you. So on this specific episode, we're going to be focusing on the accountability partner who is joining you in porn recovery. And in an ensuing episode, we'll talk more about, well, what should that look like if they're not? But Kevin, maybe we could start with some of the things that we suggest you commit to with your accountability partner, because I think it's important to commit to some very specific things with your accountability partner. You don't just say, hey, can you be my accountability partner? Because that's too vague. You need to have very strong commitments you're making. And that's what we want to touch on here.
Yep. And like you alluded to a little bit earlier, we'll talk about this in more detail in a later episode when we talk about the elephant and the rider analogy. But basically, you want to try to make these accountability systems as simple as possible. Because especially when you're starting something brand new and novel, like overcoming a porn addiction, you're part of this new community, it's kind of exciting. You're going to have a natural temptation to try to go overboard and be a little bit too ambitious. Okay, so it's really important for us to talk about having a daily plan, especially when it comes to your accountability partner. Now, here's the thing that you have to talk about that, and we'll talk about this actually in a future episode called The Elephant and the Rider, where we talk about the psychology of behavior change. But the basic gist for now is you want to make any goal that you have or any kind of commitment that you make as simple to follow as possible, because that's what's most sustainable. And for a lot of guys, when they first start off on this journey, when you're starting off with an accountability partner and you're starting off on this new Fapstinence lifestyle, it can be kind of exciting because it's a novel new challenge that you're partaking in. So there's going to be a big temptation to just go overboard with it. But here's the question that you have to ask yourself from the very beginning. Okay, this is very important. Whatever you're doing on a daily basis, can you repeat that every single day for the next year? No problem. And if the answer to that is no, then you have to seriously reevaluate what your daily system should be in terms of accountability. So what I mean is, a lot of times when guys start off with this, and I can tell you from experience with my background as a personal trainer, a lot of people have a significant amount of fire lit under their ass. So they're going to do things like they want to check in every single day and do like an in-depth video phone call every single day. Well, the issue is, if you do that all the time and you can't sustain that for a year, what happens when you're not able to sustain that anymore? If you actually become, let's say you succeed with it, but if you become reliant on that as the reason for you to not relapse, as soon as that is gone, as soon as that becomes extremely inconvenient, the likelihood of you relapsing again is going to be very, very significant. So you want to be able to make sure that the accountability systems you have are as simple as possible. So here's what we suggest is, with your accountability partner, all you should do at the end of every single day, just check in with them with a voicemail message. That doesn't mean like a voicemail. I mean like a voice message through like WhatsApp or Messenger, or if you have an iPhone, you can just leave a voice message really quick, just telling them how your day went. And the voice message typically has a 1 minute limit. So you can just talk to them for 1 minute, tell them how you felt, tell them how your day went, and then they can do the same back to you, and that's it. Another thing that you can also do, if you want to have a more in-depth conversation with them, is just to plan to have an in-depth conversation, a video call or a phone call, once a week. No more, no less. Right? Because if you start to go overboard with these things and you become too reliant on your accountability partner, then you're using them as a crutch, which you definitely don't want to do. This is still a journey that you're not going about alone, but at the same time, you need to find the strength within you to fight it. And then your accountability partner, your group, the group setting, the mentors that you have with us, we're there to support you and help you along the way, and you're there to support us along the way as well. We're all working as a team, but you still need to put in the work individually. And when you become way too reliant on another person with your accountability partner, then are you truly actually transcending your addiction and becoming a stronger person if you're too reliant on them? It's hard to tell, right? But more so just from a practicality standpoint, just put that little thought experiment in your head before you implement anything, saying, okay, can I sustain this for the next year every single day? No problem. If the answer is no, then you have to reevaluate. But this is our suggestion, to keep it as simple as possible. Just do a voice message once a day back and forth with your accountability partner, and that's it.
Yeah, Kevin, that's a really, really good point. I'll just add one extra thing there, is that we're going to be very specific about how you go about this to make that easier for you. So in the examples we're giving here, we're going to be very specific about what we think are some good steps to take with your accountability partner. The next thing we'd say is, it's really important to assert your plan early with your partner and to check back in with them regularly, because when you make long-term goals like this, you need to have a plan in place, but you also need to be prepared for that plan to change, right? And that's a big part of checking with your accountability partner. How are things going? What are the things you're doing, like journaling or exercise or whatever? And are there some ways you're going to need to tweak your program as you go? Yeah, with
Absolutely.
that, it's important to kind of reinforce your friends and, it's important to think about what kind of reinforcement does your accountability respond well to. If you know that you're someone who responds well to having tough love, like Kevin does, then it's important to let your accountability partner know that. Versus if you're someone who that's going to kind of shut you down, right? It's like when you're coaching, Kevin, I'm sure you need to be aware of, how do my fitness clients respond? Because if what I'm saying is going to make them shut down and get demotivated, it's the opposite of what I want.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. You need to make sure that you have that communication from the get-go of what type of accountability works best for you. Is it the more kind of encouraging, positive kind, or the more negative kind? And just to get you guys know, especially with men, for the most part, because I've worked with both men and women tend to respond to more kind of encouragement. Men overwhelmingly respond to negative reinforcement, and also it's interesting because there's studies that show this, that negative reinforcement is actually much more effective in terms of behavior change than positive, by the way. But in terms of being a little bit more straight up, a little bit more like, come on, man, like you're so much better than this. What are you doing? Like, come on, let's go.
Yeah.
Right? That type of attitude, men respond way better to that. And you can see that in like drill sergeants, for example, in the military, right? They're not being like, come on, guys, you can do it. They're not cheerleaders. They're more like a drill sergeant. That's because men respond better to that. So just keep that in mind. It might not sound as great, but if it gets you better results, then you seriously have to ask yourself, okay, well, is my feelings getting hurt temporarily and protecting my feelings more important to me than actually seeing results? Well, you have to ask yourself that question. But you need to make sure that your accountability partner is on board with being harsh towards you if that's what you need, and they're on board with you being harsh toward them if that's what they need.
Right.
I will be 100% honest. 99% of you guys, you're going to respond better to that than you will through, the cheerleader, you can do it type of attitude.
Well, I think the main issue either way is that you're being constructive with your criticism, right? So if you're going to be real with somebody, I almost use that word more than harsh, right? If you're being like raw and authentic with your partner, which I hope you're choosing someone you feel like you can do that with, that's important. You will be able to say what they need to hear. If they're slacking, if they're thinking about things the wrong way, you need to be able to be like, "Come on, man, get back on track." And the compliment sandwich is a good way to do that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Start with
compliment
something
sandwiches are
positive.
perfect.
Start with something
Mm-hmm.
positive, then you give them the tough criticism, and then you reinforce them with like, "But I know you can do this." And that way you're being real, you're being honest. And it's hard to give constructive criticism. People are not very good at it naturally, I've found in this modern age. So be cognizant of how you're saying things, but hopefully you and your partner are aware that you're trying to support each other this whole way through. I'm going to jump to the next point because we got to touch on a bunch of these surface level things. And then in the next few episodes, we're going to get into them in a little more depth. So, being on the same page is big, but one of the other aspects of checking in daily is you need to reinforce a habit, right? You're trying to overcome a bad habit of using pornography to deal with your issues. And so in placing yourself in a positive habit of thinking about how you feel and how you're doing and checking in with another person, you're going to be making this connection in your head about what you're doing and how it affects your porn use. Let me explain that. And remember, we're going to explain it in more depth later. If I'm, for example, not getting a lot of sleep, I'm not sleeping well, I'm waking up early and I'm cranky, and I notice on those days that I'm having a harder time, I'm having more triggers go off, and I'm relapsing more frequently on the days that I have not slept well. What do you think that's telling me, Kevin?
Basically, that you need to sleep better.
To sleep better. I need to sleep better in that situation. Okay. So be aware life is holistic, right? If you're used to exercising and that's one of your stress releasers, all of a sudden you're being a couch potato. You might not think that has anything to do with your porn addiction, but you bet your ass it does if that's how you deal with stress. And if you're stressed out, if that's one of your triggers. So
Mhm.
I think habitually checking in and being honest with yourself about how you're feeling, how your day is going, things like that is huge.
Absolutely. Yep.
Now, Kevin, I think to get to the next spot, why don't you kind of touch on how we should send this daily message? Because you said we need to be very specific, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What does it look
So you
like?
want to be very specific, and what's cool about a lot of these messaging platforms is it only gives you like a 1 minute time to actually say what you need to say. And again, like I said earlier, the simpler you can keep it, the better, because you're going to be way more consistent with it. Can you sacrifice 1 minute a day? I bet you can. Yeah, so that's all you got to hold yourself to. And if you can't do that, then you're not serious. You're just not serious about this stuff. You can do it. You can sacrifice 1 minute a day just telling someone about how your day went. But in terms of the structure, here's how you should do it. So the first thing you should say is just rate on a scale of 1 to 10. Or you could, well, let's just try to be as specific as possible. Let's say you want to rate your temptation to relapse as difficult, not that bad, or not at all. right? Within those three things. So you could say like good, bad, terrible, however you want to frame it is fine. Just keep it simple in the three different things. So first start off with that. Say something along the lines of like, hey, Peter, you know, I didn't have too much of a difficulty abstaining from porn today. I didn't have too many temptations. And then after that, you talk about the things that you did, like you said earlier, that happened that day, just kind of more monotonous things. Mention, hey, I had a good night of sleep today. I had a great day at work. My boss complimented me on doing really well at work lately, and I feel great today, right? And then let's say on another day you do the same thing, same system. You say, okay, well, today I was really tempted to relapse, and I got really close. And I'm messaging you right now because I'm tempted to relapse, and me talking to you right now is going to really help me not relapse. And today I felt really stressed out. I had a really bad night of sleep. My boss chewed me out at work, and then just go into the rest of your day. And what's cool about this too is when you do these messaging back and forth, you have a record of what happened. You can go back and listen to them, and you can start to see these trends and take notes as to why certain things happen the way they did on a day-to-day basis, right? And that's another reason to keep it more simple, is because it's easier to look back on. It's hard to look back on you having like a series of 30-minute conversations with your accountability partner unless you're taking notes the entire time. Simplicity is key. So that's kind of the way that you should structure it. First, talk about your temptation to relapse in three different ways. Really tempted, not tempted that much, or not tempted at all, and then talk about how the rest of your day went in accordance to that.
Right. And if you're going to write it in a journal too, which I do recommend is a good way to do about thinking about your day, I would ask yourself some of these kind of questions. How did my day go? What emotions was I feeling? And how intense was my day as far as dealing with porn goes? And you can rank it, like you said, Kevin, whatever your ranking ends up being, keep it simple and keep it consistent. So if you're going to say low, medium, high, you're going to say the one that Kevin suggested. That works too. Personally, I already forgot the way Kevin said it. It's easier for me to think low, medium, high. But whatever you're going to say, the point is keep it consistent. That way, even when you're sending your messages, you're like, you're doing it at a specific time of day too. And you're saying, hey, I've had a good day, got good sleep, I exercised well. The intensity was pretty low for me, thankfully, and I'm feeling pretty happy today, or relieved, or something like that. And you can even mention if you recognize that that was a really intense feeling. Oh my gosh, I felt peaceful today, and was like a pretty high intensity. And there's the point of that is to, like you said, have a record, but also start to recognize patterns, which we'll talk about in way more depth in future episodes about noticing your triggers and your habits. But surface level here today. So moving on to the next point, you want to have your brother or your sister's back if you're a woman going through this program. Although in Fapstinence podcast, we're predominantly focusing on guys and on our platform. So you want to have your brother's back. And that means when they're struggling, you need to support them how you can. And if you have your plan in place, you could be asking them those kind of questions, right? Did you do those things you said you were going to do? This worked well for me. And support them the way that you can, right? And remind them that they can keep going. And then if there's something that comes up that you're like, yo, I have no idea how to handle this on my own, I don't know how to help them. Guess what you need to go? Go to your sponsor, go to your professionals. People like Kevin or myself, we're always happy to get your questions, or in the community, Fapstinence fam on Facebook. Reach out to some of your other fellow accountability partners out there on the web who are also going through that same struggle.
Absolutely. Right on. So what we're going to do, we're going to go over these much more in depth in the next few episodes. What we're going to be talking about next episode is specifically how to have an accountability partner that isn't on the journey with you. So join us then, and we'll see you in the next episode.
We'll see you guys on the next episode.